The wind carried the scent of dust and fear. The valley of Ophrah lay still beneath the evening sky, its fields stripped bare, its vineyards trampled underfoot. The land of Israel, once flowing with milk and honey, was now nothing more than a feeding ground for invaders. The Midianites had come like a plague. For 7 years, they had swarmed over the land, hordes of warriors on swift camels, descending upon Israel's fields just as the harvest ripened. They took everything, leaving nothing behind but barren soil and starving families. And the people of Israel? They had lost hope. They no longer cried out to the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, of Moses, of Joshua. They had turned to the idols of Canaan, to the false gods of wood and stone. But not all had forgotten. Deep within a winepress, hidden from sight, a man worked in silence. His name was Gideon, and he was afraid. The wheat in Gideon's hands was barely enough for a meal. He ground it between his fingers, his eyes darting toward the horizon. If the Midianites saw him, they would take even this. The winepress was deep, built into the earth to crush grapes, but now it had become a hiding place. A place where Gideon could thresh wheat in secret, unseen by his enemies. But as he worked, a voice cut through the stillness. "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." Gideon froze. The voice was not human. Slowly he turned, and his breath caught in his throat. A man sat beneath the oak tree, dressed in radiant white, his presence heavy with something not of this world. His face was calm, yet his eyes burned like fire. An angel. Gideon's heart pounded. He was no warrior, he was a man hiding in fear, a man who had seen his people crushed under the weight of Midianite oppression. And so he answered not with faith, but with bitterness. If the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened? Where are his wonders, the miracles our fathers spoke of? He brought us out of Egypt, but now he has abandoned us. The angel's eyes did not waver. Then he spoke again. "Go in the strength you have, and save Israel out of Midian's hand. Have I not sent you?" The words hit like a hammer. Gideon took a step back, shaking his head. But I am the weakest of my clan. My family is the least in Manasseh. I am nothing." A moment of silence passed. Then the angel rose to his feet. "I will be with you," he said, his voice like the echo of eternity. "And you will strike down Midian as one man." Gideon's hands trembled, his mouth was dry. This could not be real. But deep inside, something stirred. A spark, a whisper. Could it be true? Could the Lord still fight for Israel? Gideon swallowed his fear. He needed a sign. His father's house, his own home, held an altar to Baal, the false god the Israelites had begun to worship. His people had traded the God of their ancestors for this lifeless idol of stone. And the Lord commanded him, "Tear it down." Gideon's blood ran cold. Tear it down? Before the whole village? Before his own father? But the command had been given. So, in the dead of night, when the world was silent, Gideon gathered 10 men. By torchlight they tore down the altar, hacking at the wooden pole of Asherah beside it, shattering the stones of Baal's shrine. And in its place they built a new altar, an altar to the Lord. By sunrise the village had awoken to chaos. "Who has done this?" they shouted. They searched, they questioned, until finally someone spoke. It was Gideon, son of Joash. A roar of anger rose through the streets. "Kill him! Let him die for what he has done." But before the mob could take him, Gideon's father, Joash himself, stepped forward. His face was unreadable as he looked upon his son. Then he turned to the men of the town. "If Baal is truly a god, let him defend himself." The people fell silent, and Gideon's life was spared. But there was no turning back now. The war had begun, The Midianites returned. They swept into the valley, countless as locusts, their camels a vast sea of movement. The people of Israel trembled, for they had no strength to stand against them. But then a trumpet sounded, and from the hills men began to gather. Not warriors, not kings, not men of renown. Farmers, shepherds, fathers. Gideon looked upon them, 32,000 men. Not enough, but something. Then the Lord spoke. You have too many. Gideon blinked. Too many? Tell the men, whoever is afraid, let him go home. Gideon hesitated, but he obeyed, and 22,000 men turned and left. Only 10,000 remained. Gideon's chest tightened. This was madness. But the Lord spoke again. Still too many. Gideon's breath caught. He watched as the Lord commanded him to bring the men to the water, to watch how they drank. And in the end, only 300 remained. 300 against thousands. 300 to defeat an army that filled the valley. And the Lord said, with these 300 men, I will deliver Israel. Gideon clenched his fists. This was not possible, and yet, the same voice that had spoken to him in the winepress was speaking again. I will be with you. And Gideon chose to believe. The night was deep, the sky stretched wide and endless, a canvas of cold stars above the valley of Jezreel. Below, in the valley, the Midianite army slept, their countless tents forming a sea of shadows beneath the moonlight. From a ridge above, Gideon watched in silence. His heart pounded. Even from this distance he could see the torches flickering between the tents, hear the faint murmurs of soldiers preparing for the next day's raid. There were too many. The Midianites, the Amalekites, the eastern raiders, they filled the land like a swarm of locusts. Their camels were beyond counting, their weapons gleamed under the pale light of the heavens. And Gideon had only 300 men. His grip tightened on the hilt of his sword. Then the voice of the Lord spoke. Get up, go down to the camp, for I have given it into your hands. Gideon exhaled slowly. He had followed God this far, but this? A direct assault on an army this size, with 300 men? Then the Lord added, if you are afraid, take your servant Purah with you and listen to what they say. It will strengthen you. Gideon swallowed. Yes, he was afraid. And so, in the dead of night, with only his most trusted servant at his side, he descended into the enemy's camp. The camp was a world of flickering firelight and restless shadows. Midianite warriors lay scattered among their tents, some asleep, some murmuring in their own tongue, others pacing in the dim glow of the torches. Gideon and Purah moved carefully, hiding behind stacks of supplies, crouching beneath the cover of darkness. Then, Gideon stilled. 2 Midianite soldiers sat near the embers of a dying fire, speaking in hushed tones. I had a dream, one of them muttered. The other scoffed. A dream? What kind of dream? The first soldier hesitated, then leaned in closer. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into our camp. It struck the tent with such force that it overturned and collapsed. A silence passed between them. Then the second soldier whispered a reply that sent shivers down Gideon's spine. This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash. God has given Midian and the whole camp into his hands. Gideon's breath caught in his chest. They knew his name. His name was in their dreams. His victory had already been whispered among them before a single sword had been raised. The battle had not even begun, and God had already sent terror into the hearts of the enemy. Gideon clutched Purah's arm, his entire body trembling, not in fear, but in awe. God was with him. The Midianites feared him. The victory was already set. And now, it was time. Gideon and Purah raced back up the hill, their feet barely touching the earth as they ran. By the time they reached the 300, Gideon's voice was no longer filled with doubt. "Get up," he called, his voice strong, commanding, alive. "The Lord has given Midian into our hands." His men stirred, gripping their weapons, looking to him with wide, uncertain eyes. Gideon stood before them, a man who had once hidden in a winepress, now standing as a leader chosen by God. He raised his sword. "This is how we will fight." And then he gave them a battle plan unlike any other. Not swords, not shields, not chariots. Instead, torches, trumpets, clay jars. Gideon's men exchanged confused glances. This was madness, but Gideon's eyes blazed with certainty. "Do as I do," he said, "and the Lord will fight for us." The 300 men spread out across the ridges surrounding the Midianite camp, torches hidden inside their clay jars, trumpets gripped tightly in their hands. Below them the Midianites slept, unaware that their fate had already been sealed. Gideon raised his hand. A hush fell over the night. Then the signal. Gideon smashed his jar against the ground. The torch within flared, fire roaring to life. At that moment all 300 men did the same, shattering their jars, raising their torches, and blasting their trumpets into the night. A deafening thunder of sound and light filled the valley. And then they shouted, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon." The Midianite camp erupted into chaos. Warriors scrambled from their tents, blinded by the sudden explosion of light, stumbling over each other in terror. The 300 men did not move. They did not need to, for the Midianites turned on each other, confusion sweeping through their ranks like fire through dry grass. They screamed, they fought, they fled, cutting one another down in the darkness, their fear greater than any enemy. And by sunrise, Midian was no more. The army had fallen upon itself. The survivors had scattered into the wilderness. And Israel was free. Gideon had been afraid. He had doubted. He had questioned. But when the Lord called, he answered. And through him, with only 300 men, the God of Israel had defeated an army beyond counting. The people of Israel wanted to make Gideon their king. But Gideon refused. "I will not rule over you," he said, "nor will my sons. The Lord will rule over you." For Gideon knew the truth. The victory was never his own. The battle had belonged to the Lord from the very beginning. And the warrior who once hid in a winepress would be remembered as the man who trusted God beyond all logic. If you enjoyed this retelling, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story from Whispers of Heaven. Until next time, stay faithful, stay strong, and keep listening for the Whispers of Heaven.